Afternoon, welcome back to another episode of The Week Ahead. I'm Zack and Ryan, co-founder of the MarCommEd network, and I'm pleased today to be joined again by my co-founder Ryan Green. How are you, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm good, Zach. Thank you very much. Great win for England yesterday, so that was a good start to the week. Were you watching?
I was, yeah. I mean, I think if you go on social media this morning, it's quite an opposite atmosphere. But yeah, I think we've got to take the win, given our history in previous tournaments. You know, I think a win's a win, and a clean sheet as well. So yeah, great to see England kick off the Euros with that win last night. But let's see how they go on further on. But
Let's see.
Yeah, maybe we might get Gareth Southgate on in the future. But no, just to kick off with today's talk, you know, we're really pleased to have Julia Benning, who's joined us from Stamford Park Trust. So, Julia, good afternoon to you.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Yourself?
Good. Yeah, great, thank you.
Good stuff. Well, thanks for joining us this afternoon. I know we've had some communication. I know you've took some interest to the network and recently joined and keen to add value to it. So really appreciate you coming on board and hopefully giving some good insight this afternoon with your overview of the week ahead. So just to kick off really, Julia, could you just give us a bit of an insight in terms of your role at Stamford Park Trust, a little bit of background about who you are and what you do, just to give people a bit of a flavour for who you are?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me, firstly. So I am Head of Marketing Comms for Stamford Park Trust, as you said, which is quite a small MAT based in the Tameside area of Manchester. So I've only been here since November. Prior to that, I worked for quite a large MAT, which was a national MAT of schools all across the country. So lots of experience in marketing comms in education. And then obviously, you know, working for a growing MAT, you see a different side to it, and it's really exciting to be part of that, of the sort of growth journey. So yeah, it's great to have networks like this because, like you said, it's quite an, you know, there's not a lot of us around that do marketing and education, so it's great to share kind of best practice and our challenges and ideas with like-minded people. So it's great to be involved.
Fantastic. No, it's great to have you in, and you know, I love the fact that you've already seen that kind of vision for what we're trying to achieve, and that ultimately is what the network is about. So, what's your week looking like then from today onwards?
So for me, obviously, the last sort of 5-6 weeks of the term. So it's kind of my favourite time of year because we're at the planning the sort of the next recruitment cycle for students. So this term is big for sort of looking at our open days for secondaries in September because they'll have, you know, schools will have a nice holiday to look forward to, but not all of us get to do that. So really getting plans in place for September. Being able to get really creative and looking at sort of what we did last year, what's worked well, what we can do differently, what our competitors are doing. And within our trust, we have currently secondary schools and a sixth form college. So two slightly different sort of recruitment cycles, different target audiences. So yeah, a real chance to get to the drawing board, looking at sort of last year's data, but thinking how can we be really creative and do things differently this year.
And Julia, just when you're working with the schools in the trust, who takes the lead on these kind of open events? Is it still very much the school, or is the trust kind of leading on these and trying to set kind of an expectation, if not the kind of finer details of how many open events or what sort of campaigns they'll do, and you know, who's really leading on those?
It's very much a collaboration for us. So the event itself, in terms of sort of what each department are doing and what's put on from an event perspective, the school tends to drive that. But in collaboration with us, we look at the data from sort of exit questionnaires and things from last year and make recommendations. But sort of the rough kind of line would be that the event itself is kind of the schools to plan and organise internally. But any of the promotion of that comes to my team. So we've been meeting already the end of last term and into this term, looking at how we want things to look, what worked well, what didn't. And like I said, the campaign is very much driven by us, and we sort of present that to the school and execute that. But we do have a little bit of a say in, you know, any feedback from last year, how we could perhaps run the event slightly differently, but very much in collaboration with the schools.
Well, fantastic. I mean, that sounds like you've got a very good operational process in place there, and you know, something I'm a big fan of. And equally with my trust, which is down the road from yourself, we have a similar approach with our schools and sixth forms, and I think it's key if you can build that operational procedure for each school, so that at this time of year they know and they've got that contact with yourself and that plan in place. It makes life a lot easier for everybody else. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Yeah, and that's something, like I said, I've only been in this post in my current trust since November, and previously, as I said, it's quite a new trust, so there hasn't been a few years of this cycle where there is a trust marketing team and schools have been working in isolation. And what I very much tried to implement quite quickly was an understanding of who does what and expectations, and setting kind of little bits of boundaries so that we're not duplicating, we're being as efficient as possible, we're supporting schools as much as possible, and just outlining, key roles and responsibilities within open evenings and various different elements of the sort of marketing and comms world. And that's something I've really tried to build into, keeping in touch with regular meetings, not having meetings for meeting's sake, but having a clear plan that we're working through. So we've implemented big marketing and comms plans for the whole year, for every initiative, around open evenings, results days, general academy events, etc. Everything's mapped out with the clear planning periods for each, but also who's doing what. So that's something that's been a priority of mine since starting, and that's hopefully going to impact the kind of next recruitment cycle as well.
Credit to you, because I think that's awesome to see. You've been there since November and you've implemented that already. I'm sure people listening today, or anyone that listens afterwards, will probably want to reach out to see how you can do that, and if there's any best practices you can share. Because I do. For me, that's the foundation of everything we do as marketing and comms in any industry, I suppose. And if you've got that infrastructure in place where people have got that accountability, you've got the plan or the forward plan there, as you rightly say, then gave some examples of. I think all that creativity that can then be built on top of that, which is in this current climate we're all in, for me, is absolutely key to help to stand out amongst the crowd.
Definitely. And it's built trust as well. Like, we're a new central team, and schools join academy trusts, and people are sometimes a little bit nervous about what autonomy they still have as schools. And I think making that clear as well, and we all are experts in our own fields, and it's having that trust in the team to know no one's coming to take over, but actually we can bring expertise, and all sort of work collaboratively. So
fantastic. Yeah, brilliant. I think so. Just within that, then, what challenges are you currently facing in any campaigns that you're executing or looking to plan ahead with?
I think a lot of there's a few things really. I think, like I said, being a sort of new team and a relatively new mat, a lot of it is the understanding of the marketing function, and like I said, that the trust in the sort of central team to deliver that. I'm a big believer that although we work for a mat and you have to have some kind of consistency throughout the mat itself, each school has their own community, their own strengths, challenges. So it's kind of bringing that across. And I think, like I said, just that understanding of, some leaders have come from other mats where marketing's worked really well. Some are used to sort of doing that themselves in isolation if they've just come from a local authority. So I think a big challenge for me is that understanding of how we can help and add value, but equally not take away that identity of each school. So I think that's something that I've been doing the process that I've just discussed, I've kind of faced, and I'm sure others will face the same challenges in there as well.
It's a big thing, isn't it, when schools are joining trusts? A lot of trusts kind of have this promise of, we'll let you have your own identity, we'll let you be, keep your own brand, we won't change you. There are those promises, and we do know those. There are those other schools out there who probably have their own identity, but they're kind of quite they're clothed, or shall we say, or branded as clearly as part of a trust.
Yeah.
And it's finding that balance, and I suppose a lot of that must come from the chief exec and the directors of the trust. But at what point? How often are you communicating with senior leaders in your schools, in your academies, and what are the kind of things that you would say to them to give them reassurance that you're here to collaborate with them? I mean, it sounds like the work that you're doing, like you said, is you're informing their decision making by giving them data, and I think that is perfect because it removes this subjectivity, this interpretation, this personal bias that I think happens a lot in schools, especially when it comes to marketing. I feel that we should be doing this, and it's more about what they want to say rather than what the audience wants to hear. And you have to find that balance. And so that data information. But what else do you kind of bring to the table with, like you said, the school senior leaders to really show them the value of marketing and comms?
I think, like you said, having some sort of evidence to back up what you're saying is key. So whether that is data, this was harder in my old trust because it was so widespread, but I made a conscious effort to really try and get to know the schools and their context. So, for example, this trust that I work in now is based in the Tameside area of Manchester. I don't live in that area, but it was important to me to really get to know it, spend time in the schools, understand their challenges, the communities. So I think as long as you can show that, you haven't just come in and you've got kind of, this is how we do it in schools, because it isn't a one size fits all. It's really understanding the context of specific schools. I think that's a huge, that's of high importance to me. So that when I am, like you said, we can just advise leadership, can't we, in our area? But showing that you've got that evidence to back it up, whether that's data, whether that's just experience, whether it's showing that you've really researched the area and the competitors and what they're doing and what's working and what's not for them. I think that's really important.
A topic I talk a lot about amongst the community, that balance between competition and community.
Yeah.
But obviously, to put it plain and simple, we are competitors in the area that we're operating in. How you mentioned there about looking at competitors. How important is that to you to have that competition?
I think it's important. So I had a scenario recently where one of the main competitors of one of my secondary schools, they're very strong. They have a very strong message about what their selling point is. And previously, one of the school that I work with was trying to compete with that, although they didn't have the same facilities or the same offer that they had. And we just kind of sat down and was like, look, we're not the same. We can't compete with that. But what makes us different and what is our selling point that we can then appeal to those parents that they don't all want that same thing. They may do, but they may not. So how do we fit for those other parents and those other students? So I think it's really important because, it may be that we can compete on certain elements, but also it might make us sit down and look at what our other strengths are and how we differ, and really use those as our main selling points rather than just trying to be the same or compete with something that perhaps we can't.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I think it's about taking that in approach and looking at how actually you can be the best at what you do with the resources you've got, but equally looking at what other people are doing to drive innovation. So thank you for that. Just final question, and you have kind of already touched upon it, but what emerging trends across the sector? I know there's a lot of grey clouds looming over us in every angle at the minute. But what emerging trends or challenges are kind of influencing your current marketing and comms strategies?
I think two key things for me at the minute. One is the use of video. So obviously we know that that's a huge thing across all social platforms, no matter what industry we're in. Traditionally, schools have had promotional videos, which are usually sort of a minute and a half, 2 minutes long. And something I'm looking at the minute is there still a place for that? Because actually, if you look at data, it's showing us that people just want short, sharp messages as they're scrolling. People are using social platforms to inform them of decisions. So is there really a place for a full promotional video for a school, which traditionally has always been there, but do we perhaps need to change our approach a little bit? So that's something that, networks like this is great because we can sort of share our thoughts on that and see what other people are doing. Secondly, sometimes slightly controversial is the use of AI. Someone I follow on LinkedIn is great at coming up with AI tools for marketing professionals. And I think especially in education, we've kind of shied away from that a little bit just because of the implications for coursework and things like that on the education side of things. But actually, we don't want to do ourselves out of a job, but how can we use the tools that are out there to help? We know in MATS that, we don't have a marketing manager for each school. We're a central team and we have to serve a number of schools. And how can we use those tools that are out there to be a little bit more efficient?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, isn't it, Julia? I mean, I think given the lack of resource and the lack of capacity and the lack of funding, something that can amplify your workload by 30, 40, 50%, it's got to be worth considering.
Yeah.
But you've got all the added complications of, what do you put into it, data privacy, data protection. So that does make it a real challenge. And I think just dealing with schools and children and making sure that you're disciplined and you don't put any sensitive data in is there has to be some training and there has to be some guidance around that. But just to pull back to your point about the video, I love these 3-minute, 4-minute, these amazing high quality production video. I mean, some of them are just stunning. And then you see like 50 views. And I think to myself, that would have cost thousands of pounds out, not to mention all the man hours and disruption to the school and everything to produce this 3-minute video with 50 views. And if the intention is to grab people's attention, you'd be better off standing on the street corner handing out £50 notes, because it's literally the same thing. I completely agree. I think the use of video is going to be really interesting because people love seeing the stuff that goes on beyond the school gates. And I know we've done research in the past, and actually parents they want to see their kids learning. They want to see the environment they're in. They want to see the fun. They don't get to witness that a lot of the time. So giving them that keyhole kind of view really helps. But yeah, just how do you do it? How do you make it worthwhile? I'm totally there with you. There are people who are going to lynch me and go, how dare you, Ryan? Like, come on, we've done videos together. It's definitely not about that, but it is about, if you're doing video, where's the campaign to raise the view numbers? How are you getting that video out? How are you getting it in front of audiences? How are you getting people to see it? Just doing the video on its own is not enough these days. It's just like putting a web page up just isn't enough anymore. You've got to drive traffic to that page. Otherwise, it's a waste of time.
Absolutely. I think just to add on to that, I'm on the fence because I do think there's a lot of value still in long form video, and the short form stuff is obviously the big driver of where social is concerned. But it's taking that multi-channel approach where if you're creating a long form video, and you take snippets from it and use it as reels that then drive into that long form, whether that be on YouTube or Vimeo or your website. It's having that strategy in place where you're taking sound bites, where you're getting more people beyond those 50 views that you referenced there, Ryan. So I think, there's some fantastic resources out there, and there's still a big place for it, but it's got to be a broader thought. So I think it's a great point you raised, Julia. I think that kind of concludes us there for today. I think it sounds like you've got a very busy week ahead, and you're certainly tackling the challenges head on. So credit to you and your team for doing so. And it sounds like you've got a real strong infrastructure in place there at Stamford Park Trust. So full credit to you. But for myself, I just want to say a massive thank you. I think you probably just want to say a big thank you as well, Ryan.
Yeah, big thank you. Thank you, Julia, for coming, really giving up some of your time today. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And I'm sure people probably want to pick up on some stuff that you've mentioned today. So I know you're part of the MarCommEd LinkedIn group, aren't you? So
I am.
People find you there, and I'm sure that they can reach out to you via your trust if they have got any queries to follow up on anything you've said today.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for watching.
Yeah, take care. Have a great week.